Rita leaned back in her chair, watching as the cafe hummed with life around her. The soft clinking of cups, the murmur of conversations, the laughter of children. It was a symphony she had never thought she would hear again, not after the long years of silence, fear, and struggle. Her gaze fell on a young girl sitting at one of the corner tables, carefully writing in a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. She reminded Rita of herself, years ago, scribbling plans and dreams that seemed impossible. Quietly, Rita walked over and knelt beside her. "What you working on, sweetie?" Rita asked gently. The girl looked up, startled, then smiled. "Just stories about the world, about people who do big things." Rita's lips curved into a small smile. "That's a wonderful start. Keep writing. Never stop, no matter what anyone says. The world needs people who dream." As she straightened, she noticed an older man entering the cafe. His presence was calm, deliberate, almost unassuming, but there was something familiar about the way he carried himself. He moved toward the counter, ordered a coffee, and then paused as he looked around the space. Rita felt a small tightening in her chest. Recognition. Memories from so long ago, bitter and painful, but softened by the years. She turned back to the cafe, taking a deep breath. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had built a life beyond the shadows. From the kitchen, the Triplets' children came running, calling for Rita. "Grandma! Grandma!" They climbed onto her lap, each vying for her attention, and she laughed, a pure, unrestrained sound that echoed across the cafe. Rita hugged them close, feeling the warmth of generations she had nurtured. She whispered to herself, "We are free, we are safe, and we are strong." The man from the doorway left without approaching, his figure disappearing into the sunlight outside. Rita didn't chase him. She didn't need to. She had already reclaimed her story. She had already rewritten the ending. As the evening settled over the cafe, golden light spilling through the windows, Rita looked out at the bustling street and felt the pulse of life she had fought for, her children, her grandchildren, her community. Every hardship, every loss, every tear had led to this, a life rebuilt, a legacy unbroken, and a heart unshaken. And in that quiet triumph, Rita finally allowed herself to hope fully, without fear. Rita watched her grandchildren chase each other around the cafe courtyard, their laughter bright and unburdened. The smell of freshly baked bread and coffee mingled with the warm afternoon sun, and for the first time in decades, she felt a kind of peace that had nothing to do with survival. It was about living. Inside the cafe, a group of students from the local university gathered at a long table, notebooks and laptops open, animatedly discussing plans for a community project. Rita had become a mentor to them, helping them organize workshops, fundraising events, and local initiatives. She gave guidance freely, sharing lessons from her past without dwelling on the darkness, letting her story teach resilience rather than bitterness. A young woman approached her, shy but determined. "Miss Rita," she said, voice trembling, "I just wanted to thank you. Your advice on the small business incubator really helped me pitch my project. I got the funding." Rita smiled warmly, ruffling the girl's hair. "See? You did it all yourself. I just reminded you to believe in yourself. That's all." Outside, Marcus, Michael, and Emma, the triplets who had once stared at Aaron with confusion and fear, were helping paint a mural on the side of the cafe. Each stroke of bright color symbolized hope, growth, and transformation. They paused occasionally to laugh, chase a stray dog, or squabble over whose turn it was to mix colors. Rita walked over to them, placing a hand on each of their heads. "You've grown so much," she said softly. "I am proud of you. And remember, no matter where life takes you, hold on to kindness. That's what truly matters." From the street, she noticed Aaron standing across from the cafe, watching quietly. His face had aged, softened with time, and there was a hint of humility in his eyes. But Rita didn't approach him, didn't need to. The past was a shadow she had acknowledged and let go. Instead, she turned back to her cafe, to her children, to the students and the young people seeking guidance. She looked around at the life she had built, A life that rose from the ashes of betrayal, injustice, and unimaginable pain, and felt a quiet pride. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Rita went to the doorway, watching the horizon. A breeze swept through, carrying with it the sense of the city, the sea, and the earth. It was a reminder. Life moved forward, and so had she. Her voice was low, almost a whisper to herself, yet firm. I survived. I thrived. And I will continue to rise, every single day. The cafe lights flickered on, illuminating the mural, the laughter, and the hope that filled the space. Rita stepped back, letting the world move around her, knowing that she had finally claimed her place in it, not as a victim, not as someone defined by injustice, but as a woman who had rewritten her story and would continue to write it, with courage, love, and unshakable strength. Over the next few years, Rita's life transformed in ways she had once thought impossible. The cafe, which had started as a small corner shop with chipped paint and second-hand tables, became a thriving community hub. Local artists displayed their work on its walls, students held workshops in the back room, and people came from neighborhoods across the city to learn, eat, and share stories. The triplets, Marcus, Michael, and Emma, grew into bright, determined teenagers. They each carried pieces of Rita's resilience, but also her joy. Emma had inherited her mother's curiosity and intelligence, spending hours reading and asking questions about everything from history to science. Michael had a knack for music, his laughter often blending with the melodies he played on his guitar in the cafe courtyard. Marcus was quietly inventive, always tinkering with small projects and solutions for the cafe or the neighborhood. Rita watched them one afternoon, sitting on a worn bench with a cup of steaming tea. Her children had become a living testament to endurance, hope, and the possibility of redemption. She remembered the fear, the pain, the years of struggle, and the sleepless nights in prison, and she let herself feel the full weight of how far they'd come. One evening, as the sun set in a canvas of orange and pink, a familiar figure appeared across the street. Aaron. He paused, hands in his pockets, looking at the cafe. His expression was unreadable at first, but then, slowly, a faint smile crept across his face. Rita didn't move. She didn't need to. She had no bitterness left. The past was a shadow she acknowledged, but didn't let touch her light. The years had softened the anger in Aaron's eyes, replaced now by quiet reflection. He'd come, not for confrontation, but to witness her success, her strength, and perhaps to understand what he had helped destroy years ago. Rita didn't approach him, and he didn't approach her. They both knew that some things needed no words. Inside the cafe, the mural was nearly complete. It depicted a tree, strong roots, flourishing branches, and vibrant leaves. Each brushstroke had been painted by the hands of the children, students, and neighborhood friends, a symbol of growth from hardship and the life that blossomed from struggle and perseverance. Rita walked around the cafe, checking on the young people setting up for a community workshop, her heart swelling. This was her life now, not defined by what had happened to her, but by what she had built, nurtured, and inspired in others. The breeze carried the sounds of laughter, music, and conversation. Her grandchildren ran past her, arms linked, chasing each other with the boundless energy of youth. The cafe doors swung open and closed, filled with people seeking knowledge, companionship, or just a warm cup of tea. Rita finally allowed herself a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought of the little girl she had been, the young woman in prison, the mother fighting to survive. And she realized something profound. She had outlasted the darkness. She had claimed her life back in a way that no injustice could take from her. When she opened her eyes, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a golden glow that bathed the cafe in warmth. Rita smiled softly, a smile full of peace, pride, and unshakable resolve. She stepped into the courtyard, ready to greet the life she had worked so hard to build. The world around her buzzed with possibility, and she was no longer just surviving. It was her time to flourish. Years passed, and the small cafe that had been Rita's sanctuary grew into something even larger, a true community center. What had once been chipped tables and second-hand chairs became long wooden tables for workshops, shelves stacked with books and games, and walls adorned with murals telling stories of resilience, struggle, and triumph. Local schools partnered with her to host classes in leadership, entrepreneurship, and art. The triplets had grown into young adults, each pursuing paths that reflected the lessons Rita had lived through. Emma became a writer and activist, publishing essays and stories that explored injustice, resilience, and hope. Michael pursued music professionally, his songs often inspired by the trials they had endured, and he performed at community events, blending joy with raw emotion. Marcus became an engineer, focusing on sustainable design, often helping to improve infrastructure for the neighborhood and the cafe itself. Rita herself had grown into a quiet but powerful figure in her city. She was often invited to speak at events on justice, women's empowerment, and community development. People admired her not just for what she had built, but for how she carried herself, with dignity, empathy, and unwavering integrity. One afternoon, as Rita watered the small garden behind the cafe, she noticed a familiar figure walking down the street. It was Aaron, older, more measured, and carrying a hint of humility in his posture. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Aaron approached slowly, hands behind his back, as if he wanted to appear non-threatening. "I've come to apologize," he said quietly, voice tinged with regret. "I was wrong. About everything." Rita studied him, the memory of her suffering long buried beneath years of survival and building her life anew. "I've moved on," she said, her voice calm. "I don't live in that past anymore." Aaron nodded, looking at the cafe, at the children running, at the murals that told her story silently. "You've built something incredible," he admitted. "I see now what I failed to see back then." Rita allowed herself a small smile. "Then let it be a lesson for you," she said. "And for anyone who underestimates what people can survive and rebuild from." He nodded again, silently acknowledging that words could never undo the past. Then he walked away, leaving Rita in the garden with the sound of laughter, music, and life surrounding her. Years later, Rita would see her own grandchildren playing under the shade of the courtyard trees, learning from the murals, helping with small tasks at the cafe, and laughing freely in a world that she had fought to shape. She thought of her younger self, the girl arrested, imprisoned, betrayed, and scared, and felt a warmth that came from having transformed pain into purpose. The cafe became more than just a place to eat or learn. It became a symbol of hope, justice, and resilience. And at the center of it all, Rita stood quietly, watching life flourish around her, knowing that she had won, not because life had been fair, but because she had refused to be defined by injustice. Even the city seemed to recognize it. The community she nurtured, the art, the music, the stories shared in that small space, they all whispered of a woman who had turned her suffering into a living legacy. And in that moment, as the sun dipped low and painted the city in gold, Rita finally felt a complete sense of peace. She had survived, she had built, she had nurtured, and she had loved. And that, she realized, was enough. Over the next decade, Rita's small cafe grew into a cornerstone of the community, a beacon for young people, artists, and dreamers. The space wasn't just for eating anymore, it was a hub for education, creativity, and support. Workshops on literacy, entrepreneurship, and art filled the walls, while evening classes taught children who had no access to proper schooling. Rita never charged those who couldn't afford it. Her belief was that opportunity should never depend on wealth. Her triplets became pillars of the cafe's mission. Emma ran the writing workshops, encouraging children and young adults to express their truths through stories and poetry. Michael managed performances, bringing music and joy to people who had never experienced it in such a nurturing space. Marcus worked on structural improvements, designing new spaces for learning, gardens, and small businesses to flourish within the cafe's growing footprint. Despite her success, Rita never forgot the pain that had shaped her. Every mural on the walls, every story shared aloud, every workshop she taught was infused with the lessons of her past, the injustices, the betrayals, the nights of hopelessness. They were reminders that survival was not enough. Transformation, resilience, and giving back were what truly mattered. Then, one rainy afternoon, as the cafe bustled with children sheltering from the storm, a familiar figure appeared at the door. It was Aaron, older, wearier, but undeniably carrying a weight of remorse. He paused at the threshold, looking around at the life she had built, at the laughter, the art, the music. "I didn't expect to find all this," he said softly. "I thought," he hesitated, struggling for the right words. "I thought life would have left you broken." Rita didn't respond immediately. She wiped her hands on her apron and studied him quietly. "Life tried," she said, "but I didn't let it win. You should take note of that." Aaron nodded, swallowing hard. "I came to say,
I'm sorry.
For everything. The night, the accusations. I was blind, arrogant. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to justify." Rita's eyes softened, not from pity, but from strength. "Apologies don't erase the past, but you can learn from it. I have." She gestured to the cafe around them. "This is what happens when you don't let your pain define you. When you turn it into purpose." He looked around, eyes wide, almost overwhelmed. He started, then stopped. He knew no words could capture what she had endured, nor the grace with which she had rebuilt herself. "I hope you find a way to live with your mistakes," Rita said quietly. "That's the only thing left for you to do." Without another word, Aaron turned and left, leaving Rita standing in the middle of her cafe, listening to the rain pattering against the windows and the hum of life thriving despite everything. That night, Rita looked around her space, at the children curled up with books, at the music still echoing faintly from the instruments stacked in the corner, and she smiled. Her journey had been brutal, unfair, and heart-wrenching, but it had also been transformative. She had survived, she had created, and she had nurtured the future. In that quiet, golden-lit moment, she whispered to herself, "We are alive, we are whole, and we will continue." And the cafe, her legacy, stood as proof that from the deepest despair, life, hope, and love could bloom again. Years passed, and Rita's influence spread far beyond the small cafe. Her work had sparked a movement. Other former inmates, struggling single parents, and marginalized youth sought her out, drawn to her resilience and her unwavering belief that anyone could rebuild. She mentored them, offering guidance, education, and the tools to create lives worth living. Her triplets, now young adults, became leaders in their own right. Emma had published a series of children's books inspired by the cafe's stories, drawing attention from schools across the country. Michael had turned his performances into a nonprofit program, providing music education to children in underserved neighborhoods. Marcus had started a social enterprise, designing community spaces modeled after the cafe, integrating gardens, libraries, and vocational training centers. Together, the three of them expanded their mother's vision beyond the city, leaving footprints of hope wherever they went. Rita herself had become a symbol of justice and resilience. Newspapers occasionally ran pieces about her journey, though she never sought fame. Every article, every recognition, she redirected toward her cafe and the programs she nurtured. Her story became a case study in universities, inspiring students to think about restorative justice, systemic inequities, and the power of community-driven transformation. And still, Aaron remained a shadow from the past. Occasionally, she'd see him in the background, an observer, not a participant. He had not sought forgiveness publicly, but through subtle gestures and small donations to the cafe's programs, he had begun to make amends quietly. Rita never confronted him. She didn't need to. Her focus was on the living, not the ghosts of her past. One day, as she walked through the garden she had created behind the cafe, now blooming with native plants and flowers cultivated by the children she mentored, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Emma, smiling, holding a small bundle of letters. "These came for you, Mama," Emma said softly. Rita opened them carefully. They were letters from people whose lives had been touched by her programs, students who had gone on to universities, former inmates who had found employment, families who had regained hope. Each letter told a story of growth, resilience, and gratitude. Rita's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of quiet triumph. Every hardship, every injustice she had endured, every sleepless night raising her children alone, had led to this, a ripple effect of hope that she had created through sheer determination. She looked out at the cafe, alive with laughter, music, and life, and whispered, "We survived. We thrived. And we will keep thriving." And somewhere in that thriving, her past no longer haunted her. It had been transformed into a foundation for generations to come. The woman who had once been broken, accused, and alone had become a force of enduring love and change. Decades passed, and the world Rita had built continued to flourish. The cafe, now a cornerstone of the community, had grown into a network of centers across the country, offering education, shelter, and mentorship for children and young adults who had nowhere else to turn. Her programs were widely recognized, attracting volunteers and supporters from near and far. Rita herself had aged gracefully. Her hair was streaked with silver, and the lines on her face spoke of years of struggle, laughter, and triumph. Yet her eyes, still sharp and compassionate, held the same fire that had driven her through her darkest days. The triplets, grown into accomplished leaders in their own right, often visited, bringing their own children to learn from their grandmother's wisdom. One sunny morning, Rita sat on the porch of the main cafe, watching a new generation of children play in the garden she had once planted herself. She held a small journal in her lap, writing letters to her grandchildren. Letters meant to teach them about resilience, kindness, and the power of never giving up. Emma, now a successful author and advocate for education, approached her with a cup of tea. "Mama, you've done more than anyone could imagine," she said softly. "These kids, these programs, they exist because of you." Rita smiled, a slow, serene smile that spoke of peace finally earned. "It's not me alone," she said. "It's all of us. Every child who learns, every young adult who gets a chance. They're proof that no one is truly alone if we lift each other up." Meanwhile, Aaron, now much older and quieter, occasionally visited the foundation in secret. He never sought attention or public recognition. Over the years, he had quietly contributed, sometimes funding scholarships or infrastructure, always leaving his mark unseen. And Rita, though aware of his gestures, had long since moved past the anger and pain of her youth. She had found a way to transform her suffering into something lasting and beautiful, and the past no longer held power over her. One evening, the sun dipping behind the city's skyline, Rita stood in the garden with her grandchildren circling her. She watched as Marcus's children tended to the flowers, Michael's children sang songs, and Emma's youngest read aloud under the shade of a jacaranda tree she had planted decades ago. Rita felt the weight of time and the beauty of what she had endured. The girl who had been broken, accused, and abandoned had grown into a woman whose life had shaped generations. She bent down to plant a new sapling, whispering to the children, "This tree will grow strong, just like you, just like all of us. Remember, we survive, we thrive, and we pass it forward." As night fell and the first stars appeared, Rita looked out over the garden, the cafe, the laughter of her family echoing through the air. She knew that her story, once one of despair, had become a story of hope, legacy, and enduring love. The woman who had been alone with a baby in her arms, penniless and accused, had created a world where no one would feel as lost as she once had. Her life had come full circle, not as a tale of suffering, but as a testament to resilience, courage, and the quiet, unstoppable power of a determined heart. Rita stood in the fading light of the late afternoon, the garden around her humming with life. The triplets' children laughed and chased each other through the flower beds, their small hands brushing against the petals she had planted years ago. The jacaranda trees, now tall and strong, swayed gently in the breeze, their purple blossoms catching the sunlight like fragments of memory. Her hands rested on the wooden railing of the porch, the same porch where she had often sat in her early days, writing in her journals, dreaming of a future that had seemed impossible. She thought of the journey, the prison, The betrayal, the nights of tears, the hunger, the fear, and a quiet pride settled over her. She had survived it all, and now she was the center of a life full of love, legacy, and growth. From the corner of the garden, she saw Aaron approaching. He had aged, his face lined with time and the weight of the life he had lived, but his posture carried the same quiet strength she remembered. He stopped a few feet away, giving her a small nod. He said nothing at first. Words weren't necessary. Their shared history was carried in the silence between them. Finally, he spoke, voice low and steady. "You've built something remarkable here, Rita." She smiled softly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "It wasn't me alone. It was the children, the families, the people who believed in a better world." Aaron's eyes flicked to the children running around. "And you taught them to believe in themselves. That's extraordinary." Rita chuckled, a warm, gentle sound. "Extraordinary isn't a word I'd have used for myself, not back then. But maybe it fits now." He nodded, silent for a moment, then handed her a small envelope. She took it hesitantly, unfolding the paper inside. It was a donation, anonymous, generous, enough to fund new centers for years to come. No signature, no explanation, just a note. "For the lives you save and the hope you give." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't tears of fear or despair. They were tears of recognition, of closure, of justice, of a life that had finally found balance. The children ran up to her, tugging at her hands, dragging her toward the garden. "Grandma, come play with us," one shouted. She laughed, letting herself be pulled into the chaos of youth and life. Aaron lingered a few steps behind, watching, and then quietly stepped back, leaving her to the joy she had earned. She felt the sun warm her face, felt the life pulsing around her, and for the first time in decades, she felt entirely at peace. The city beyond the garden shimmered in the evening light, full of possibilities. And Rita, once a woman trapped by circumstance and cruelty, stood as a beacon, a reminder that even the darkest nights could give birth to the brightest dawns. Her legacy was no longer just her own survival. It was a movement, a testament, a living story of hope that would echo for generations. And in that moment, surrounded by the laughter of children and the whispering leaves of the jacarandas, Rita knew she had finally come home. Years passed, and the grove that Rita had once tended as a small sanctuary had grown into something extraordinary. The jacarandas towered over the pathways, their roots entwined with memories, journals, and offerings left by countless visitors, children, students, and families inspired by her work. It was no longer just a garden. It was a living archive of hope, resilience, and transformation. Rita walked through the grove one golden morning, her hand brushing the purple blossoms. Her hair was streaked with silver, her face lined with both struggle and laughter, and her body carried the quiet strength of someone who had survived storms most could not imagine. She wore a long, flowing dress, loose enough to move freely, yet elegant. Around her, volunteers and young apprentices tended the flowers, cleaned the pathways, and recorded stories for the next generation. The triplets, now young adults, ran past her, laughing as they carried baskets of seeds and saplings. Emma had become a teacher, Michael worked in community outreach, and Marcus had taken on a leadership role at one of Rita's newest learning centers. They had grown up not just surviving, but thriving, carrying forward the principles their mother had taught them: integrity, empathy, courage. Aaron appeared again, this time not as an observer of her suffering but as a quiet partner in the ongoing work. He walked beside her, carrying trays of water for the volunteers, his steps careful so as not to disturb the blossoms. The tension that had once defined their interactions had softened into mutual respect and understanding. He spoke gently. "You've turned tragedy into something incredible." Rita smiled, shaking her head. "It wasn't just me. It never is. But thank you for believing in the possibilities of a life after pain. Even when I didn't." He looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I'm sorry for what happened. For everything. You deserved justice, not suffering." And you turned it all into something meaningful. Rita laughed softly, a musical, warm sound. It took me a long time to understand that justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about survival, about creating spaces where people can heal, grow, and thrive. That's the kind of justice I believe in. Aaron nodded, watching as the children ran past them, their laughter ringing like bells in the grove. I see it now. And you've made it impossible for anyone to ignore. From the corner of the grove, a young girl approached, holding a small sapling. Miss Rita, she asked shyly, can I plant this here? Of course, dear, Rita said, kneeling so that the girl could place the roots in the soft soil. Plant it, water it, and remember, every life you nurture makes the world better. The sun dipped lower, bathing the grove in a soft purple light, echoing the colors of the jacarandas above. Rita stood, looking out at the landscape she had nurtured, not just the trees and flowers, but the people, the lives, the stories. She had taken the broken pieces of her own past and built something enduring, something that would outlast her, something that would continue to grow long after she was gone. And in that moment, she finally allowed herself to feel the quiet pride and peace she had long denied. Her legacy was not defined by the injustice done to her. It was defined by the love she gave, the lives she touched, and the hope she planted, literally and metaphorically, in every corner of her world. Aaron stepped beside her quietly, and together they watched the sun slip behind the horizon, the jacarandas swaying in a gentle evening breeze, whispering secrets of survival, resilience, and the endless cycle of life. Rita closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to the grove, "We made it. All of us. And we will keep making it. Always." The grove seemed to hum in agreement, a soft, eternal echo of memory, healing, and the boundless strength of a woman who refused to be broken. The years rolled on, and the grove became more than just a sanctuary. It became a movement. Students, families, and community leaders came from across the city to learn from Rita's methods of nurturing both nature and people. Her story, once one of suffering and injustice, was now one of resilience and hope. Marcus, Michael, and Emma were fully grown now, each carving out their paths while remaining deeply connected to their mother's vision. Marcus had founded an urban agriculture program that used the principles of the Grove to revitalize abandoned lots across the city. Michael became a counselor and advocate for children in vulnerable situations, drawing on the lessons of survival and compassion he had learned in his early years. Emma taught environmental science, leading her students on field trips to the Grove, instilling in them a reverence for life and a belief in the power of one person to make a difference. Rita herself had become a public figure in the community, though she never sought fame. She gave talks about resilience, justice, and the power of reclaiming one's life from the grips of cruelty. She advised NGOs and local governments on community-driven regeneration projects. Her foundation had grown, supporting educational scholarships, safe housing for young women, and initiatives to prevent exploitation and injustice. Aaron, who had once been the source of so much pain in her life, had returned quietly and humbly. He never tried to erase the past or demand forgiveness, but he offered support, funding, and connections to help her projects grow. Over time, the tension between them softened into a fragile, honest friendship, one built on recognition of mistakes and the shared desire to make the world a better place. One afternoon, Rita walked through the grove alone, feeling the dappled sunlight through the jacarandas. She ran her fingers along the soft petals and thought of the long journey from the frightened 22-year-old trapped by injustice to the woman standing here today. Her hand fell to her belly briefly, remembering the baby she had carried through prison, a child who had grown up surrounded by love, guidance, and freedom. A familiar voice called behind her, "You've built something incredible, Rita." She turned to see Aaron standing a few steps away, holding a small bundle of seed packets. "I wanted to help plant the new section," he said quietly. "The one for the young women's mentorship garden." Rita studied him for a moment. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the kind of respect and humility that came only after deep regret. She nodded, a small smile forming. Let's do it then. Together. They worked side by side, digging, planting, and laying the foundation for another generation. Around them, children ran through the paths, volunteers laughed, and the jacarandas whispered in the breeze, a living testament to survival, hope, and renewal. Even after all she had endured, Rita understood now that life's greatest victories were not measured by revenge or restitution, but by what one chose to create in spite of the past. And here, in the shade of the growing trees, surrounded by those she loved and had nurtured, Rita finally felt whole. The grove stood as a promise. No matter the injustice, the betrayal, or the suffering, life could be reclaimed, rebuilt, and blossomed into something extraordinary. And Rita, the woman who had once been stripped of everything, became the keeper of that promise, not just for herself, but for generations to come. Years passed, and the grove thrived beyond anything Rita had imagined. Its winding paths became classrooms, its trees shelters, and its soil a living archive of memory and growth. Children who had once wandered the streets or faced uncertain futures now ran freely through its shade, learning, laughing, and discovering their worth. Marcus, Michael, and Emma had each grown into their callings, guided by the lessons of resilience and compassion their mother had embodied. Marcus's urban agriculture program spread into neighboring cities, turning abandoned lots into gardens and teaching sustainability to teenagers who had nowhere else to go. Michael's counseling network provided safe spaces for vulnerable youth, advocating tirelessly against exploitation. Emma's environmental programs inspired young students to see nature not as a resource to be consumed, but as a partner in shaping the future. Rita herself had become a quiet legend in the city. She traveled to universities, community centers, and civic gatherings, speaking not of her suffering but of her work, the transformative power of care, mentorship, and the reclamation of life from trauma. Her foundation had grown, funding education, safe housing, legal aid for women, and programs designed to prevent exploitation. She had turned the tragedy that had once defined her into a platform of hope for others. Aaron remained a steady, if understated, presence. He no longer carried the arrogance of his youth. Instead, he offered practical support, resources, introductions, and financial help, but never sought recognition. Slowly, trust had begun to form between them, cautious and deliberate, rooted in shared purpose rather than sentiment. He had apologized in small, meaningful ways, helping Rita without demanding forgiveness she wasn't ready to give. One crisp morning, Rita walked alone through the grove, the early sunlight spilling across the jacarandas, petals drifting like violet snow. She paused by a newly planted section, designed for mentorship programs with young women. Her hand rested lightly on the soil, feeling the pulse of life beneath her fingers. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Aaron's voice startled her gently from behind. She turned to see him holding a small bundle of seedlings. His eyes were steady, without judgment, without pretense. "It is," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "We can plant this section together," he said, stepping closer. "The mentorship garden, you know, the one you envision for the girls who have nowhere else to go." Rita studied him, feeling the weight of the years, the mistakes, the betrayals, the growth. For the first time in decades, she felt the possibility of peace. "Let's do it," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. Side by side, they worked the soil, planting seeds, laying the foundation for another generation. Around them, children laughed and ran through the grove. Volunteers carried water, and sunlight filtered through the jacarandas, illuminating the path they had all created together. In the quiet moments, Rita reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from betrayal, injustice, and despair to resilience, purpose, and renewal. The grove had become more than a sanctuary. It was a testament to survival, hope, and the enduring power of creation. And as she looked at the young seedlings taking root in the rich soil, she understood something profound. Life's greatest victories were not measured in revenge or restitution, but in the courage to rebuild, to nurture, and to bloom, again and again, no matter what had been taken away. The grove whispered around her, carrying the promise forward. No matter the suffering, no matter the loss, life could always be reclaimed, and beauty could always be grown from the ashes of pain. Rita closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of earth, blossoms, and possibility. For the first time in her life, she felt truly whole. As the years rolled on, Rita's Grove became a hub of transformation, both for the land and for the people it nurtured. The jacarandas grew taller, their purple canopies stretching toward the sky, and with each passing season, the grove became a symbol not only of survival, but of thriving against all odds. Marcus, Michael, and Emma had grown into capable, compassionate adults, each carrying a piece of their mother's strength. Marcus had expanded his urban agriculture initiatives to schools across the city, teaching children not only how to grow food, but how to cultivate resilience and self-worth. Michael had established a counseling and advocacy center for youth who had been through trauma, making sure that no child felt alone in their struggle. Emma, whose environmental programs had started in their local community, had grown into a passionate activist, speaking at conferences and universities, inspiring other young people to fight for sustainability and justice. Rita herself had become a quiet legend. She rarely sought the spotlight, but her influence spread far and wide. Foundations, NGOs, and local governments looked to her for guidance on community development, mentorship programs, and restorative justice. She often thought back to the years of suffering, the false accusations, and the prison sentence she had endured. She didn't let herself dwell on bitterness. Instead, she used her story as a beacon for others, teaching them that the darkest nights could lead to the brightest dawns. One morning, she was walking through the grove when she noticed Aaron approaching, carrying a basket of seedlings. Time had tempered his arrogance. His eyes were steady, calm, and without pretense. "Morning," he said softly. Rita smiled faintly.
"Morning.
"What brings you here today?" "I thought we could plant these together. For the new mentorship program." He held out the basket. "The girls who've just joined." Rita studied him, measuring the weight of years between them. Then she nodded. "All right, let's plant them." They worked side by side, gently digging into the soft earth, placing the seedlings carefully, and covering them with soil. Around them, laughter echoed as the children of the grove ran past, their joy as much a part of the grove as the trees themselves. Volunteers carried water and tools, helping wherever they could. Rita paused, feeling the pulse of life beneath her fingers. She looked at Aaron and spoke softly, almost to herself. "It's strange how life brings you to the right place, even after all the wrongs." Aaron nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can help shape the future." Rita smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Then let's do it. Together." The sun filtered through the jacarandas, painting dappled patterns on the ground. Birds called from the branches, insects hummed through the air, and the grove seemed to breathe around them, alive with possibility. For the first time in decades, Rita felt truly unburdened. She had been through suffering she never could have imagined, yet here she was, nurturing life, cultivating hope, and witnessing the growth of a legacy that would outlast her. The grove whispered its promise. No matter the darkness, life would continue. No matter the pain, growth was possible. And no matter what had been lost, there was always the chance to bloom again. Rita closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of earth and blossoms. She felt her children nearby, the future waiting in their hands, and she knew with certainty the story of their survival, resilience, and hope was only beginning. As the years passed, the grove became more than just a sanctuary. It became a living testament to Rita's endurance, her children's courage, and the quiet power of resilience. Every tree she planted, every seed nurtured, held a story of survival, of hope rising from suffering. Marcus had grown into a determined young man with his mother's resilience. His urban farming programs expanded beyond their neighborhood, reaching schools across the city. Children learned not just how to grow vegetables, but how to take pride in creating something meaningful from scratch. Michael had built a youth counseling center, helping countless young people navigate trauma and loss, ensuring that no one felt invisible or unheard. Emma, Driven by her environmental passion, spearheaded citywide initiatives to restore green spaces and teach sustainable practices. Together, the siblings carried forward the values their mother had instilled: compassion, perseverance, and justice. One spring morning, Rita walked the grove with Marcus and Emma, the earth soft under their feet. The jacarandas had grown tall, their purple flowers fluttering in the breeze like gentle confetti. "Look at this place," Marcus said, scanning the grove with pride. It's alive. Every tree feels like it has a story." Rita nodded, her hands brushing over a new sapling they had just planted. "It does. Every life here is part of the story, every struggle, every triumph." Emma crouched to inspect a patch of newly sprouted flowers. "It's amazing how far we've come. From nothing to this." Rita's eyes lingered on her children, seeing the echoes of her own strength reflected in their faces. "We planted more than trees," she said softly. "We planted hope. And it will grow, long after we're gone." From the distance, a car approached, and a familiar figure stepped out. It was Aaron. Time had softened his demeanor, leaving behind only a quiet humility. He carried tools and a small basket of seedlings. "Morning," he greeted. Rita studied him, wary but calm.
"Morning."
"What brings you here?" "I thought I could help," Aaron said, extending the basket. "For the new mentorship program. These are for the kids joining this week." Rita hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's plant them." Side by side, they dug into the earth, placing each seedling carefully. The children of the grove ran past, their laughter mingling with the hum of insects and the whisper of the wind. Volunteers carried water and soil, helping wherever needed. As they worked, Rita felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. She looked at Aaron, her voice soft but steady. Life has a strange way of bringing people to the right place, even after the worst. Aaron nodded. "We can't change what happened, but we can shape what comes next." The sun shone through the jacaranda canopy, casting a patchwork of purple light on the ground. Birds called from the branches, and the grove seemed to breathe around them, alive with the promise of the future. Rita closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of earth and blossoms. She felt her children nearby, the future in their hands. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that everything broken in the past could be healed. The grove whispered its quiet reassurance. No matter the darkness, life would continue. No matter the pain, growth was possible. And no matter what had been lost, there was always the chance to bloom again. As evening approached, Rita and Aaron stood together, hands dirty with soil, watching the sun set through the purple leaves. "Thank you," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Aaron's eyes met hers, calm and sincere. "For what?" "For showing me that life can still be beautiful, even after everything." And in that moment, surrounded by the trees that had grown from tears, struggle, and hope, Rita felt the weight of the past finally lift. She was free, not just in body, but in spirit. Years passed, and the grove thrived under Rita's care. Its roots ran deep, mirroring the resilience of her family. The jacarandas were taller now, their blossoms spilling purple confetti across the soft earth. The air was always filled with the hum of life, children laughing, birds singing, the faint rustle of leaves whispering stories of survival and hope. Marcus had become a natural leader, taking over community initiatives that combined education, agriculture, and mentorship. He led workshops that taught children to grow gardens in schoolyards, to understand the value of hard work, and to believe in themselves even when the world seemed determined to break them. Michael channeled his empathy into counseling programs, ensuring that children who had experienced trauma found guidance and support. Emma, fiercely committed to the environment, expanded the grove into a hub for sustainability, teaching young people how to plant, care for, and protect the earth. Rita, now older and wiser, walked among them like a quiet guardian. She no longer carried the weight of shame and fear from the past. Instead, she bore the pride of watching her children, and now their students, thrive. She often paused under the largest jacaranda, tracing its bark and smiling at how far they had come. One afternoon, Aaron returned, this time not as a figure of the past, but as a partner in the present. He brought tools, seedlings, and a willingness to work without expectation. "Morning," he said, carrying a basket filled with young plants. Rita looked at him, measured but calm.
"Morning."
"What brings you here?" "Helping," he said simply. "These are for the kids joining the mentorship program this week. Thought the grove could use some new life." She nodded.
"All right."
"Let's plant them." Side by side, they dug into the soil, careful with each seedling, as Marcus, Michael, Emma, and dozens of children ran around, laughing and playing among the trees. Volunteers joined in, carrying water and tools, ensuring that every seedling was planted with care. As they worked, Rita felt a rare serenity. She looked at Aaron, who paused to wipe sweat from his brow. "Life has a strange way of bringing people together," she said softly. Aaron nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can shape what comes next." The sun dipped lower, casting long purple shadows beneath the jacarandas. Birds called, the breeze whispered, and the grove seemed to breathe in sync with the rhythm of life around it. Rita closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of earth and blossoms, feeling the weight of her past lift. Marcus ran up to her, eyes bright. "Mama, come see." The kids planted their first garden over by the south edge. Rita smiled, letting him pull her hand. The grove had grown beyond a mere sanctuary. It was now a community, a place where life could be rebuilt, where hope could root itself in even the hardest soil. Evening fell, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. Rita and Aaron stood side by side, hands dirty, hearts full. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to him, but to life itself.
"For what?" he asked.
"For showing me that even after the darkest nights, something beautiful can grow." And under the tall, blooming jacarandas, with the laughter of children in the background and the wind carrying the scent of earth and flowers, Rita felt the promise of the future. She was free, truly free, and everything she had endured had led her here, to a place where hope was alive and life, despite everything, could bloom again. Years turned into decades. The grove grew, not just in size, but in significance. The jacarandas now towered above, their branches a protective canopy for the children and the community that had sprung up around them. It became a hub for learning, storytelling, and activism, a place where history was remembered and future generations were nurtured. Marcus, now a man in his 30s, had taken leadership of the educational programs. He had become a passionate advocate for children who, like he once had been, needed guidance, resources, and hope. He often told the story of their mother, not in sorrow, but in resilience, how she had survived betrayal, injustice, and hardship, and how she had turned that pain into action. Michael had become a counselor and mediator for families in the community. His calm demeanor and sharp insight helped countless children and parents navigate trauma and find solutions where there seemed to be none. His empathy had become a lifeline for many. Emma, the youngest, had grown into a formidable environmental activist. She led workshops on sustainability, spearheaded urban gardening initiatives, and partnered with local governments to bring green spaces to the city. Her vision had extended far beyond the grove. It had become a model for other cities and communities across the country. Rita herself, older now, her hair streaked with silver, walked through the grove each morning. She remembered every step of her journey, the despair, the fear, the imprisonment, and the uncertainty. She had lived through the worst life could throw at her and emerged stronger. The grove had become her sanctuary, her classroom, and her testament. One morning, as she tended to a cluster of newly planted seedlings, a familiar voice called her name. "Mama Rita." She looked up to see Aaron, older and grayer, carrying a basket of tools once again. His smile was softer now, gentler, free from the cold edge of the past. "Morning," she said cautiously, though a part of her was glad to see him. "I thought I'd come help with the new garden beds," he said, setting the basket down. "The children told me about them. I wanted to see for myself. Rita nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions, trust, caution, and something warmer, something that had grown from the long years of distance and healing. They worked side by side, planting seedlings and watering the soil. The children ran between them, carrying tiny watering cans, laughing and shouting with the freedom of youth. For the first time in many years, Rita felt a sense of completion. Not the end, but a new chapter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grove, Rita looked around. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their blossoms drifting like purple snow. Aaron wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at her. You've built something incredible here, Rita. All of this, it's extraordinary. Rita smiled faintly. It wasn't just me. My children, the community. Everyone played a part. But yes, I suppose I finally found a way to turn pain into something good. The grove was alive with the sound of children, the scent of flowers, and the promise of growth. And for the first time in decades, Rita felt a deep, unshakable peace. The past had shaped her, yes, but it did not define her. She had survived, she had loved, and she had nurtured life from the ashes of her suffering. Under the tall, blooming jacarandas, the story of Rita and her family continued, not in sorrow, but in resilience, growth, and hope. And the world around them, ever-changing, seemed just a little brighter for it. Years later, Lina, Rita's daughter, was no longer a little girl running through the jacaranda grove. She was a young woman, fierce and bright, with her mother's determination and her aunt and uncle's sense of justice and empathy. The grove had been her playground, her classroom, and the foundation of her understanding of the world. Every blossom, every seedling she had planted as a child now towered above her, a living reminder of resilience and care. Lina had become the bridge between the grove and the wider city. She organized workshops, led local sustainability initiatives, and mentored younger children who had grown up facing the same challenges her mother had once faced. Her reputation as a passionate advocate for education, environment, and justice had begun to spread beyond their neighborhood. One afternoon, she walked through the grove, notebook in hand, jotting down ideas for a new community project, a series of urban gardens across the city that would teach children about food, sustainability, and self-reliance. She paused beneath the tallest jacaranda, brushing her hand over its rough bark, and thought of her mother. Everything she went through, all the pain, all the fear, Lina whispered to herself. She made it beautiful. We can make it even better. Rita, older now but still strong, watched Lina from a distance. Her heart swelled with pride. The years of hardship, the prison, the heartbreak, it all had a purpose. She had survived, yes, but she had also built a legacy. Marcus and Michael were nearby, helping a group of children plant new saplings. Marcus taught them how to measure sunlight and water for optimal growth, while Michael taught patience, mindfulness, and how to listen to the needs of both plants and people. Emma had already started a mobile initiative in the city, spreading the grove's teachings to other communities. Aaron, older and gentler, had become a quiet supporter of the family. He volunteered occasionally, helping with resources and mentorship programs, but he never imposed himself. He had apologized long ago, in ways only actions could show, and now he was content to see the family flourish without interfering, a shadow of the past softened by time. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the grove in shades of gold and purple, Lina and Rita walked together along the winding paths. "Do you think we're making a difference?" Lina asked, looking around at the children planting, laughing, learning. Rita smiled softly. "We already are. Every seed, every lesson, every child who believes they can change the world, that's the difference. And it grows. Always." The jacarandas swayed gently above them, their blossoms falling like soft rain. And for the first time in decades, Rita felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the promise of what had been planted. Not just trees, but hope, resilience, and a legacy that would continue to grow, branch by branch, generation by generation. Lina's work in the grove had become more than a local project. Word spread of the urban gardens and community programs, and soon schools, civic organizations, and even small businesses reached out, asking to replicate what she had built. She spent mornings in classrooms teaching children about soil, plants, and sustainability, and afternoons coordinating volunteers to expand the grove's reach into neglected city lots. One Saturday, a group of university students approached her, eager to start similar groves in other parts of the city. Liana led them under the oldest jacaranda, her notebook filled with carefully sketched plans and ideas. "This is where it started," she said, her hand brushing over the rough bark. "My mother taught me that every seed we plant is a promise, not just to the plant, but to ourselves, to our community, and to the future." The students nodded, inspired. They had seen the difference in the children who had grown up visiting the grove. Their curiosity, empathy, and sense of responsibility bloomed as surely as the flowers above. Meanwhile, Rita had begun speaking quietly with local organizations about women who had been wronged by injustice, sharing her story only when necessary, always careful to focus on hope and resilience rather than pain. She had no desire for revenge. Her mission was survival and building something lasting for the next generation. At night, after the children had gone home and the volunteers had left, mother and daughter would sit beneath the jacarandas. Lina would talk about the day's work, and Rita would listen, offering guidance when needed. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, letting the grove hold their memories, their hopes, and their dreams. Then came the day when Lina received a call from a small foundation in another city, offering to fund a network of urban groves across the country. It was a chance to expand her vision, to create a living chain of education, community, and environmental stewardship. She ran to the grove, bursting with excitement. "Mama, this is it. We can take it everywhere." Rita looked at her daughter, proud and astonished. "Everywhere, Lina. But remember, it all starts here. Always." Lina's vision grew. She trained leaders in each new city, helping them create groves that would feed communities, teach children, and restore forgotten spaces. The grove became a movement, a living testament to resilience and regeneration. And yet, even as the project grew, Lina never forgot the personal lessons her mother had taught her: strength in adversity, compassion for others, and the courage to grow despite everything. Each new grove was a tribute to Rita's survival, to the life she had fought to preserve, and to the hope that even in the darkest night, life could bloom again. The Jacaranda Grove, once a hidden sanctuary, had become the heart of a larger, thriving world. And as the sun set behind the trees, petals falling like a gentle rain, mother and daughter stood together, watching life flourish from the soil that had once been sown with pain, but now overflowed with hope. If you like, I can continue further into the next generation, showing Lina's own children discovering the grove and carrying forward the legacy, creating a full multi-generational saga of resilience, justice, and growth. Do you want me to continue in that direction?